some issues pertaining to student accommodation where some of the students, they apply to be given accommodation. So there are some form of collusion with the accommodation owners, or where the students are not staying in the accommodation, but they claim the money from NSFAS for accommodation. There's excessive payments received outside the proclamation that is from 2013. When we look at the data, we have seen that there's more excessive payments which has been made from 2013. Remember, our proclamation starts from 2017 to come now. So the issue that we are assessing is to see whether we can extend the proclamation to start looking it from 2013, because we could see that there's more money that has been paid during that period of time. The lack of procedures to perform proper reconciliation of funds disbursed to students and funded list. This has led to NSFAS hiring the consultant to perform the reconciliation in the form of what is called the closeout report. And there's involvement of syndicate in student accommodation. This is another focus area that we will be looking at it as we proceed with our investigation. And SIU has identified different scenarios in terms of which students are funded, such as there is an issue of overpayment, where there's overpayment of students, where students are being given more than what they qualify for. And there's an issue of underpayments, where students are paid less. And there's also an issue of ghost student, where students do not exist, but there's funding that is being done by NSFAS to those students. And there's an unfunded student, and there's double dipping. Double dipping relates to students who goes to different institutions. They get funded into different institutions at a time. And there's an issue of dropouts, where students apply, they drop out, but the money is still being paid to the institution. And the last observation is all these implications are as a result of the fact that different governance levels and senior management staff did not fully discharge their duties in terms of all the different applicable legislation. So it's one of the observations that we have done, but we are still going on with the investigation so that we can able to identify some of those deficiencies and able to identify the person that is responsible who did not discharge their duties. Then in terms of the potential systemic recommendation, we have outlined 5 of them there. That is development of comprehensive security policy. Once the area of weakness is identified, it is important to develop a comprehensive security policy that outlines the security controls that needs to be implemented. The policy should cover everything from user access control to password management, segregation of duty, user activity log, and data backup. If such policy exists at present, it should be reviewed as part of effective ICT governance. Second one, implement role-based access control. That is, role-based access control is a security model that restricts access to resources based on the roles and responsibility of individual user within an organization. Implementing RBAC can assist in controlling access to sensitive data and limit data damage causes by unauthorized access. Conduct regular security training. Educating NSFAS employee about security best practice is crucial to maintain a secure environment and can assist with risk associated with poor user control and help them identify potential security threats. Monitor user activity. The implementation of user activity monitoring system can assist NSFAS to identify suspicious behavior and potential unauthorized access to systems. Financial reconciliation. The lack of procedures to be able to perform proper reconciliation of the funds disbursed to students and the funded list. Internal audit must perform a root cause analysis of the misalignment between the funded student list and the NSFAS has and the one that the institution has. You find that the list that NSFAS have and the list that the institution has, they don't correspond. Either has many students, the other one does not have students. So there has to be some form of the internal audit that needs to take place so that each and every student is accounted for. The next slides deal with the project team. As indicated earlier, that we estimate that the investigation is going to take more than 18 months. And this is just to show that the magnitude of the investigation, that the investigation is quite huge. We are looking at close to 40,000 students. I mean, to trace all the students, it's a mammoth task. Then we thought that we should just project just to see how we do the costs in terms of how much the investigation is going to cost. You'll see that there's a number of resources that is allocated to the investigation, and the different rank of those resources allocated, and the percentage allocation of the resource to the project, meaning that some of the investigators are not working full-time on the project, because in terms of the way we do investigation, we do it in a project base, because as you are waiting for the information, you can still do another work. So as a result, we allocate percentage into another project so that you can able to do the investigation. Thereafter, we put the total number of hours per percentage just to show that how much of time does each investigator going to spend in the investigation. And therefore, we do have a charge-out rate per category of the investigator, and therefore it gives us the total amount. So you calculate all the allocation in terms of the time in the project, times the length of the project, together with the charge-out rate, so that it can able to give you the total cost per the number of resources that is allocated to the investigation. Then you can see there that the total estimate for the duration of the project, we are estimating close to 70 million. And this is just an estimate. In most cases, we don't go beyond it, because it doesn't mean that these people will be allocated, will be busy for the entire period. But we are doing it so that we can give the department an opportunity to budget, because we have found that in most instances, the department will come and say, we didn't budget for this, but we are indicating it upfront and say, prepare such amount for in case our investigation goes further, so that we at least there is amount that is available that we can able to put in. And you will note that once we take some of this matter to court, that will be another cost that will be involved, as particularly when we try to recover some of this cost. So this is just the estimate. There, written in red, it says the above is merely a project based on estimate, projection based on estimate. In practice, the actual recoverable costs are usually lower. It is net worthy that the SIU has already recovered 38.9 million during the pilot project. So you can see that based on the 5.1 billion that we are going to recover from the different institutions on the money that is lying on them, and looking also at the amount that the non-qualified student received, it's a huge amount that we are going to recover and able to give it to NSFAS vis-a-vis the amount of that we are charging them for the investigation. Then, yeah.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. I will come in and present the last two slides. Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, as you can see, the slide that is projected says SIU rate determination. We've included this slide so that the committee could really have a sense on how we determine the SIU rate. The charge-out rates that my colleague referred to are authorized by law. In terms of the SIU Act, as we investigate, we obviously have to charge the fees. So I think it is just really noteworthy to indicate that the SIU charge out rates in the previous slide that my colleague referred to were historically determined by utilizing the Auditor General's methodology of calculating recovery rates based on actual salary costs and a factor to arrive at a recovery rate per hour. And what SIU did to be competitive with the market, we actually discounted the Auditor General's rates by 40% to arrive at our charge-out rates. We just indicated there that these fees have actually been determined almost 9 years ago. So for considerations that we shouldn't really be above the market but remain reasonably competitive, these rates have really remained unchanged for the past 9 years, while the private sector companies that compete with us have actually continued to increase their fees. So we have done a comparison just to ensure that we charge reasonable fees as would be expected. So now in this year, part of our business plan is to do a full review because we believe that we've been quite reasonable and with our fees for the number of years. So we'll do a full review and a formal benchmark will be done with the private sector and of course the public sector as well, and then come up with a new determination of rates. The next slide, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, really just indicates how is it that we fare compared to the private sector. We have the benefit of having a panel of service providers. And based on the panel of service providers, we've been able to determine how is it that the private sector charges. We've had the opportunity to really use this additional resources from the private sector during that demanding period of investigating the corruption and irregularities in the PPE investigation. It was so mammoth, and we had to augment our resources. So we do have these companies on our panel, and we know for a fact that they are not, if one were to say, they're not cheap. And as a result, we've really decreased the use of these companies. Since the PPE investigation, which was so intense, we've now really reduced the use of these companies. But as and when it's necessary, we do use them. But we've gone a long way, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, in creating internal capacity. We have incapacitated our unit. And this investigation, NSFAS, is largely constituted by internal investigators. We're not using private companies to investigate here. If without going through them line by line here, you can see there that the charges and their rates, of course, also like we do, are determined based on the seniority of the investigators and so on. As you can see, it starts from the project manager, forensic accountant, procurement specialist, and so on. So, and you can see the rates per hour that they charge there. some of them going up to 1,295 per hour, 1,520 per hour for project manager, 1,690 per hour for forensic accountants, and so on. And that's really the slide for the honourable committee and honourable members to really see that we have done this comparison, and we would really want to ensure that the SIU rates are competitive, although as we're now going to do the review, I really go into this review now with an assumption that we're going to find that we are undercharging, so to speak. But we would like to make sure that we don't overcharge. We are reasonable in our charges. Honourable Chair, that was really to demonstrate that our fees are not overly expensive. In fact, we compare reasonably less with the market. I'm going to pause here, and then my colleague can probably take the committee through the challenges and risks. But it's important to note that these risks, we do put in place measures to ensure that they are mitigated. These are really just to say, if this risk is not mitigated, it's likely to cause issues. But as we speak now, the risks are well mitigated.
Thanks, Advocate. In terms of the risk and challenge, the first one is possible lack of cooperation from relevant official. Here, Chair, we are utilizing our powers. As you know, that in terms of our powers, we can subpoena anybody to appear before the SIU. So the moment there's lack of cooperation, we do utilize our power. Second one, possible destruction or loss of relevant documents. Here we are in a position to conduct search and seizure, and we are able to freeze the laptops and able to recover any information that could have been destroyed, particularly on the laptops. Loss of memories by affected officials. Here we'll identify additional witnesses that can assist with the information or to give more relevant information pertaining to whatever information that we'll be needing. Possible intimidation of witnesses. Here we have the luxury of utilizing the witness protection unit. If there's any witnesses that feel that they are intimidated, there are measures in place to make sure that we protect them. Whether the defendants will be able to pay for civil recoveries, I think here it's more about the students. As we know that some of the students are not working, and you might find that they've applied for this bursary illegally, but you find that they are not working, and if the issue is on them, and they need to pay back. So what we'll do, we won't take the fact that I'm not working, we'll be able to conduct the lifestyle analysis so that we can see the expenditure of the person, whether he's in a position to pay back the money or not. So we're not going to leave it that you are a student, you are unemployed, you are unable to pay now. So there are measures that we'll put in place to make sure that if there's any form of income, you are able to pay back the money. Prescription of claims. If the claims are prescribed, we are in a position to refer such matter to the asset forfeiture unit. Volatile climate in respect of students at higher learning institution. Here we saw it as a risk, particularly when we started the investigation, as we know that normally January, February, it's a volatile environment with the higher learning where student protests. So we make sure that we conduct our interviews or consultation off-site. We don't do it in campus where the situation might be volatile. And also we just assess them as we go on. So those are some of the key risks that we have identified, of which we are monitoring and making sure that the control works on them. Thank you.
No, thank you, Honourable Chair. That brings us to the end of the update on the investigations at the department, particularly NSFAS. We will pause here, Chair, guided by the Honourable Chair, before we go on to the next subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate, for the presentation and your team. We'd go to the department, the DG, on the same institution in terms of your own presentation. What are the issues that are pertinent, which lie in the same level in terms of this kind of investigation? We give over to you. Well, before that, I think let me advise the meeting that the chair, his flights attempted to land at the airport, Cape Town, and because of the weather, they had to turn and to Port Elizabeth. So they couldn't land in Cape Town. So that's the current situation up until further notice. Over to DG.
Honorable Chairperson, thank you very much for the opportunity. I take this opportunity to recognize the presentation by the SIU and thank them for addressing some of the issues that are really key to unlocking whatever blockages and difficulties that we may have experienced, particularly as a very large institution with a footprint in higher education that involve 26 public universities, FET colleges, 50 colleges, and 9, community education and training institutions, excluding CETAs. So our footprint is very large, and because of that reason, the issue of costs for investigations has always been our issue. In fact, the only issue in the past. And I think the presentation here does, help us to settle, in this and to focus on the business, which is clean governance and ensuring that accountability is a principle that is applied throughout the length and breadth of the institutions we are responsible for. Our presentation today, Chairperson, directly respond, to the issues that have been raised as per the requests, and it covers 3 areas. One, it's internal investigations. We provide the magnitude of all our internal investigations since the 22nd, 23rd financial year, and give the committee, a sense of this work that is being done, and we categorize this work to include the number of students that are, affected, what kind of SCM processes are in place, looking at institutions that are under investigation and employees, to give a sense that as an institution, on an ongoing basis, we are, in pursuit of good governance at NSFAS. And the department provides oversight over NSFAS, holds them accountable for these areas, and our report will provide the detail in this regard. Secondly, Chair, the report is going to cover the external investigations, which is the Auditor General's, the latest regarding the audit processes at NSFAS, as well as the SIU investigation. In this regard, therefore, Chairperson, with your permission, allow me to hand over to the Chair of the NSFAS Board, Mr. Ernest Khosa, and the CEO to present in this regard. Thank you.
Chair of the committee and members of this honorable committee, the Director General of the department and the DDGs, present here the CEO, management of NSFAS, Advocate Mtibi, from the SIU. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be part of the proceedings this morning. We're very grateful to be here. Let me start off, Chair, by just asserting this to the committee. The SIU has been very transparent to us from the very beginning, transparent on the scope, transparent on the costs, transparent on the investigation journey. We're very grateful for that. They met management. The Western Cape team, Advocate Mtibi, met me as well. They were very transparent. We met you as well, Advocate, at your offices, and thank you so much for the transparency on the investigation team. It's only natural that we'll be concerned about the costs, but we're very pleased that in the presentation this morning it was made clear that that's a ballpark figure. It's possible it could be less than that, at which point we'll only be the happiest to employ those funds to assist needy students. We've been very vocal, Chair, from the very beginning on our support of this initiative. It can only help us execute our mandate better. In particular, I am very pleased, and I believe that's the posture of our shareholder and our colleagues, with the report that we got this morning, which was spot on in many cases. Their emphasis on the closeout reports, their identification of fraudulent beneficiaries. Even more encouraging is the fact that even though the investigation is at its early stages, the SIU has been able to identify some problems which are threatening the security of the sector as a whole, which is the mafias in our student accommodation area, conniving and fraud among accommodation providers. And this does not only disadvantage us and leading to financial losses, but it also threatens security to all of us. If I were to say this, Chair, and I know that the CEO doesn't want me to say this, we saw threatening SMSs directed at the CEO of NSFAS by people who are worried about our new accommodation policies, which are going to affect the way they've been conducting business. So we're very, very elated at the way in which the SIU is spot on these issues. I'll now, Chair, with your permission, hand over to the CEO to address those issues that DG raised earlier on. Thank you.
So,
thank you, Chair. Good morning to the Honourable Chair, to the Honourable members, DG, the Chair of the Board, and all the colleagues, the Head of SIU, and all the colleagues from the department. Chair, I'll just try and go at a high level on the presentation that we have prepared. That we had prepared. Thank you, Chair. Chair, just in terms of the matters that we reported, so maybe I should start off by saying that we do have a fraud hotline at NSFAS where matters of wrongdoing are reported. So we have received about 37 cases in the financial year under review. Majority of the cases that we received, Chair, pertain to the matter that mostly was referred to by the SIU, where there's undue funding of students. So you would find that there would be a student and or a parent calling to indicate that somebody from next door is getting funding when they should not have been getting funding. So these are some of the cases that we are receiving. You would also get instances where some students are trying to defraud other students of their own allowances. So these are the matters that pertain to students. There are 3 cases that we are investigating that pertain from issues of supply chain that relate to the years 2018 that we are investigating. And also there are some instances where institutions have submitted to us undue registration information of students, similar again to a case that has been reported by the SABC that we are investigating. And then there are other cases that pertain to employees who have been purported to have done some wrongdoing. Chair, in terms of the status, Chair, 14 of these matters were finalized, 7 of these matters are in progress. We had not yet started about 16 matters. This is mainly due to capacity constraints that we are facing in the organization. But I think, Chair, this, without necessarily deferring or referring things to the SIU, some of these we are engaging with the SIU where they've taken or they've looked at our case registers, and some of the cases then would be investigated by them. So we would not necessarily want to duplicate effort in that sense. Chair, I think I did summarize the nature of the cases, but so I'll skip this slide. Chair, in terms of where we are, I think the only thing to say here with the status of the SIU investigation is that as the organization NSFAS, we are fully committed to cooperating with the SIU. We have cooperated. We are continuing to engage with them. Incidentally, even tomorrow, we have a session scheduled with them where we'll be discussing various other matters. So I think there we are cooperating. We have not at least received any indication that there isn't any cooperation. Of course, Chair, in the course of the investigation, there are certain matters that, for example, if we look at the closeout report, we are also busy conducting the closeout report. So it becomes necessary for us to get to the different methods of calculation, one that we are doing and one that the SIU has received. Also, I think I've seen that in the presentation this morning in relation to the amounts of unduly funded students. We have an amount, but it's slightly different to that of the SIU, so we will be engaging to understand how they got to the amount and what is missing in ours. So I think we are continuing to engage with the colleagues, Chair. In terms of the internal audit status, Chair, we, in fact, of all our audit, I should indicate that since the administration, Chair, as we've reported here before, that we have strengthened our internal capacity in terms of improving our controls and making sure that we have a functional internal audit department that is able to, as recommended, look at some of these matters. In fact, some of the matters as recommended by the SIU, these are matters that our team already looks at. We also have, as indicated, Chair, that we have an internal audit, a forensic department that does investigate as these matters as they are being reported to us. Chair, in terms of the status of implementation of audit recommendations, these would be recommendations, Chair, that pertain to the 2021-2022 period. we had received about 39 audit findings from the AG. We've already started implementing all of these recommendations. However, Chair, I think how we close our recommendations is that's why they are all sitting in the status of remediation in progress. It's once management has conducted and performed or implemented the recommendation, it then is taken through to internal audit that must assess indeed that the status has changed to being implemented. So these are in the process of being evaluated by internal audit. And then, Chair, just to indicate again that I think this is a repeat slide, that many of the issues that were raised pertain to areas that were in the closeout project that we are busy with, but also that of these have also been taken to internal audit to review. Chair, I think the status, maybe we should just indicate the status of the previous audit, that is the audit of 2021-2022. We had not completed our audit and the related annual report, Chair, in that we asked for an extension from the AGSA, particularly because of the closeout project that has been ongoing. We have now since submitted to the AG the revised set of accounts, having taken into account the closeout information. Initially, we had done the closeout from 2017 to 2020 when we were preparing for the financial statements. At the time when we were submitting the financial statements at the end of May last year, the closeout project had not yet been at a stage where we could report those numbers to the AGSA. So we subsequently then requested, based on the findings of the AGSA, requested for an extension. The extension was granted. We have then submitted the financial statements as agreed to the AG by the 31st of March this year. The expectation is that the AG will issue a report at the end of June in relation to that audit. At the same time, Chair, we are commencing with the current audit process. Chair, that would be the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay. That's the reports. DG, do you have anything to say?
Just one or two comments, Chairperson. First and foremost, I wish to indicate that the funding for students from disadvantaged communities and working class in both universities and TVET colleges have increased from 21 billion in 2018 to 38.6 billion in 2021, and currently sitting at 47 billion. Whereas, Chairperson, the total number of students funded in universities and colleges increased from 586,000 in 2018 to 770 in 2021. Currently, we've exceeded 1.1 million young people in South Africa that are funded through NSFAS. And that means, therefore, Chairperson, that about 80% of the students that are in our universities are actually funded exclusively by NSFAS, and 90% in TVET colleges. This is a significant, funding mechanism that ensures that access to higher education is achieved. The Constitution provides for compulsory basic education, but when it comes to further education and training, the Constitution says it shall be made progressively available as the state develop the capacity to do so. And therefore, it is important for us to look at the resources that are allocated to us, ensure an efficient use of those resources. And instruments of government like SIU, the Hawks and other state, law enforcement agencies are very important to us because they are an arm that assists us to enforce good governance so that the capacity of the state continue to increase to make accessible the opportunities for learning in this regard. And therefore, the presentations made today are important. Having said that, Chairperson, we have a role to ensure that our entities are fully accountable. And we insist that compliance with Auditor General is very important. And we are happy that as it has been requested, by the end of the financial year, NSFAS needed to submit fully its audited financial statement so that it allows the AG to make a call about the governance-related matters. We are looking forward to the report of the Auditor General, and at that point, we shall continue to hold accountable our entities in line with the mandates that establish the Department of Higher Education and Training. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much, DG and your team, the Chair of the Board, NSFAS, and the CEO for the presentation, which is inclusive of the area presentation made by SIU through Head of Unit, Advocate Motibi and his team. The Office of the Auditor General is represented here when through discussions, if there's any matter that relates to the office providing some kind of response, would probably make that reference to the office. But for now, I'll refer to my colleagues. Here are the presentations which have been made. You could then, if you need be, raise your hands for your contribution, whether questions or some comments on the report. I see Honorable Lias and Honorable Pause and Honorable Siwera and Honorable Bucas. In that order. Honorable Lias.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And good morning to everyone, and thank you for the presentations, as frightening as they may be, but important that we know what's going on. Mr. Chairman, I've got a number of questions to various people. So are you wanting me to put them all, or can I put them, get answers, put them in a hearing style?
We have got two presentations this morning. One is on NSFAS, the other one would be on National Skills Fund. Because of time, I would urge members just to put a few questions for response. Probably if you could cluster them into.
I'll do my best, Mr. Chairman.
Please,
there's so much involved here.
Yeah.
Let me just speak to SIU Advocate Motibi. The work you do is very, very important and must not be downplayed. However, the funding that's been recovered of 38 million, am I correct in understanding that that has been recovered from institutions and not from students, and that no money has yet been recovered from the 40,000 odd students who should not have been paid? Given that I think your answer will be yes, that is the case, what are the possibilities of recovering any significant amount of that 5.7 billion? I think it's 5.7 billion, 5 point something billion, from the students themselves. You've indicated quite rightly that it's a mammoth task. We're looking at spending 70 million rand And what I'm trying to get at is how much are we going to recover? How many would a non-recovery result in assets, not forfeiture, but taking over assets? In other words, if students have any kind of motor car or something like that, would we go to the point of taking their cars or their TVs or whatever away from them? But that leads me to the next question, is I don't know how far your investigation's got because it's very early, but I assume that there is some of the criminality involved or fraud involved with some of these students. And so is your mandate then to put those people in jail or to direct the information to the right authorities who would then charge? I know you don't actually do that. I hope that is someone crying and not laughing, because this is a crying matter, not a laughing matter, Mr. This is a happy committee most of the time. We get cross sometimes with people who've got namhlanje nangeke sikthethi. Ayiki fine namhlanje. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Advocate, yeah. So there's a criminality. Would we land up eventually with some of the 40,000 at least, perhaps, being involved in criminality, fraud, being charged and face those consequences? Because the other question about the recovery rate, and you've raised it, is the prescription. We know that the system that NSFAS has in place is just shocking, and I'll get there in a minute. And so I doubt that any of those students, and I'm now making a huge presumption, any of the students have been sent any accounts to say they owe the money. And if they haven't been sent an account within 3 years, it's prescribed, as I understand the law, but I'm a layman, so maybe you can explain that to me. So your suggestion of going back to 2013, I would only support that if there's a possibility of putting people in jail. Because the recovery of money, I think, is very, very limited. But I would love to hear your opinion on that. The question of your fees, you've put it here in front of us today, Advocate, and I've already said you do an important job, so please don't get me wrong. But my understanding is that your clients don't pay you very often. And so if an increase in fee structure is required in order to cover bad debts, I won't be supporting it. So I'd love to know from you what your debtors book looks like right now, and which of your clients owes you money and how long they've owed you money. Perhaps an age analysis could be sent to us so that we can also follow up with your clients, which happen to be people who are supposed to answer to Parliament as well. In terms of NSFAS itself, I think it's fairly clear, and has been fairly clear for a while, that the system has failed horribly. But one of the major system failures seems to be the payout of funds to students for a simple thing when they shouldn't get the money, and the control there being the family income, 350,000 letter not being submitted. If I were a student now in 2023, would I have been able to get money out of NSFAS without presenting that letter? Have you put a system in place just to block that one problem in your hugely faulty system? mean, surely that's an easy little quick solution, because it seems to be one of the major issues here in your system. So is that been blocked, or is it still going on? Are students still able to access funding without providing proof of the 350,000 Rand limit? Mr. Chairman, the NSFAS system, I am a bookkeeper by profession, and I just go cold when I hear all these issues. I'd love to have a briefing on exactly how the system works, point by point, how it has been fixed. I think we keep talking about what we're going to do and not what we have done, because this is not a new subject. And why we actually pay through institutions at all. We have a grant system paying out 17 million odd people every month. But we use third parties as a channel, but we don't actually give responsibility to First National Bank to assess who should get a grant and who shouldn't get a grant. We just use the banks. I shouldn't have used First National Bank. I'll be accused of promoting a particular bank, which happens to be mine. That's why it came to mind, for no other reason. I apologize to other bank CEOs for not mentioning their banks. But the point is that we don't use those institutions to determine who should and who shouldn't get. And I don't really understand how that works with NSFAS. So, Mr. Chairman, my last point is, and I'm sorry I'm going on, it's a very big subject, is the annual report. CEO, you indicate that you got an extension from the AG. Well, actually, the only extension you can get, in fact, you can't get an extension. There's no provision in the law to get an extension. The Minister, DG, has to write to Parliament to inform Parliament that the annual report is going to be late. There's a what's the word in law? There's a gap in the law, which then allows the institution, the department, to go on forever before it actually produces the annual report. So my question is, was that letter written by the Minister to the Parliament, and have we got it, Mr. Chairman? I may well have received it and not seen and not registered it, but I hope it was done. But the AG has no authority to give extensions, none at all. The deadline is a deadline in law, and if that deadline is not going to be met, there is a provision in the law, as poorly drafted as it is, for the Minister to report such to Parliament. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honourable Elias. That the two framed cluster of questions, some to the SIU and some to NSFAS. So in terms of response, which I would somewhat allow to get into that format. Before I get to you, Honourable Person.
No, thank you, Honourable Chair. Honourable Liz, thank you for the questions. In terms of recovery, the money that has been recovered to date, that has been projected on the presentation, was recovered from an institution, not from students. That being the answer, the question was, what are the possibilities of recovering from students? That is, if the investigation and evidence points to any wrongdoing on the part of the students that would have caused any loss of NSFAS. In terms of the law, when we have determined that the SIU is duty-bound to institute a recovery process. Well, in terms of possibilities of recovering, I'll probably be, guessing or estimating at the moment So, Honorable Chair and Honorable Lees, as my colleague indicated earlier on, when we reach that stage, we will do an assessment on the method of the recovery. You only recover, as you said, where there are assets or money and so on. So if the assessment points to us that there's no asset or money to recover from student X, we will make that determination at the time. But of course, there's further areas that we could look at in terms of the recovery methods. So I would really not want to just speculate. I think that's the term. But in the process of executing our legal function to recover, we will do so and indicate at the time whether against a particular student we cannot recover because there's no assets, there's no money, it's not working, and all of that. And then we will indicate to the committee when we get to that point. Would you recover assets from students? I think I've covered that. If the analysis indicates that a particular student owns assets and so on, and we are able to ensure that from an analysis that fact is determined, we will definitely look at that. And criminality on the part of the students, if evidence points that there is criminality on the part of any student, we will, of course, put together that evidence and, as required by the law, refer that evidence to the National Prosecuting Authority, and of course they will take it forward in accordance with the legislation applicable to them. Prescription, I'm really thankful that you raised that. Prescription is a legal concept which gets inquired based on the legal rules regulating prescription. And the lawyers in the team are aware of that, and that is why we have raised it. There are legal rules in terms of which, at what stage do you determine when the debt runs, and at what point does it prescribe. Honorable Lees, you indicated some of the factors that are taken into account, at what point we became aware and all of that, but there are further legal tests. So we will determine that, and we did indicate in the presentation that in other instances we will then refer matters to the asset forfeiture unit. If the issue relates to criminal action, then prescription doesn't apply. So if it relates to civil recovery, yes, we will be faced with that kind of an inquiry to make and determine whether there's prescription or not. So that would apply even to matters dating back to 2013, because we've, as the team indicates, that we have determined, Honourable Chair, that there's quite a number of matters that relates to the scope that is not covered by the current proclamation dating back to 2013, and we are indeed considering on extending that scope. If there is an increase in fees to cover bad debt, we're not considering to review the rates and possibly increasing them with a view to covering bad debt. We're definitely not doing that, Honourable Lees. It would really be, a bad financial management act. We would not do that. We are doing that simply because we have not really reviewed our rates in the past 9 years. So the team, the finance team and the investigating team that's relevant will be doing that, and they will bring out a report with recommendations whether to increase or not to increase. We might well leave them as they are. But we will really apply prudence and consideration as we look at the need or otherwise to increase or not to increase. The level of debt, that is, and I think that's a very accurate observation, Honorable Liz, we have realized over time, although the model says we charge fees, but there's quite a number of state institutions that are not paying. That is correct. And we are on record in stating that. We will provide the Honorable Committee with a breakdown of the debt and indicate state institutions that have not paid and the age analysis thereof. At the moment, at last count, which we counted, in fact, yesterday, at a management meeting we had, the debt stands at more than 1 billion at the moment. So it is really an indication that there might really be a need, and we have said that to National Treasury, that there might be a need to review the funding model. Because at this rate, if we are to proceed at this rate, and at the moment, while we are still financially stable as a special investigating unit, and we really apply prudence in our financial management, if this debt is allowed to escalate at the way that is escalating, it is likely down the line that it's going to affect the operations of the special investigating unit. So, Honorable Chair and Honorable Liz and Honorable Members, we will provide a breakdown. We are hoping that as we engage further on, that the funding model could possibly be reviewed going forward, so that the SIU is funded possibly 100% from the fiscus. Because we've really realized, amongst others, that as we investigate, more often some of the outcomes supported by evidence points to some of the officials in the organization, in the state institutions, and we then realize that that may or may not be really be affecting, the payment or not payment. So we find ourselves in this situation, Honorable Chair, where we have to follow up and follow up and follow up with state institutions, but the payments are not coming through. We will provide that breakdown to the Honorable Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate. Hopefully, Honorable Lias has been responded to in a part of the SIU, but that a few questions which relate to NSFAS for their response, specifically NSFAS. I'll ask NSFAS, DJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was one on the Minister, Chair.
Yeah.
There was one on the Minister.
No, NSFAS.
Okay. All right.
Yes, NSFAS.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Honorable Lias, for those questions. So, Chair, indeed, from a systems perspective, we have improved our systems. Many of the instances that were referred to by the SIU that we are seeing of undue funding, it's at the time where our systems were not linked with the Department of Home Affairs. The importance of linking it with the Department of Home Affairs, firstly, we confirm that the applicant is who they say they are. Secondly, we then confirm the parents of the applicant, because we use parental information to assess financial eligibility. So indeed, Honourables, there could be underlying weaknesses that are within the Home Affairs database. For example, we know that many kids, when they are registered, they are mainly registered with mother's information, and there's no father. So in that case, would not be able to pick the full household information, but to the extent that both parents are registered, then we are able to assess who the parents are. Then secondly, what we do then is we are working with, we then confirm income through the SARS database. There are limitations with the SARS database. Firstly, it's that the exchange between us and SARS is not real time in terms of the sharing of information. But at the same time, we also rely on the previous tax year's information to be able to assess whether or not there's eligibility. Where a student then, where we cannot find the parent on the SARS database, again, there are limitations there that not everybody is registered for tax or pays for tax. We then look at the credit bureau to assess whether a parent, we can get a sense of parental information in the credit bureau. But also with the credit bureau, there are limitations in the sense that people are more inclined to inflate their income because they are trying to access credit. But in essence, those are the improvements that are currently in the system. We've put in place in our system, thanks to the funding we got from the department to improve our systems, and that process of improving our systems is ongoing. But certainly, when we've assessed for 2023 and the years before, we have been using this data. Of course, it's got some limitations to it. The other source we use is also the SASSA database. We are linked to the SASSA database. Where an applicant is a SASSA beneficiary, they are automatically funded to be within NSFAS. Then again, there would be a limitation there where somebody has tried to access SASSA fraudulently because we are relying on the database from SASSA. So in essence, there are those improvements that we've made, Chair, but they are not necessarily foolproof given some of the limitations that I've indicated. So in a way, Chair, I also try to answer the second question by showing what we use from a systems perspective to get to making a funding decision. Then maybe pertinent to the second question is why were we using, in this case, institutions to make payments to students? It was mainly historical, Chair, in the sense that we would recall that the scheme at some point was decentralized, where institutions were the ones who were assessing whether or not students were eligible, and then ultimately were paying students. So we also, because of capacity constraints also in the organization, we were not able to take over that function. But what we've done this year in the guidelines, we've indicated our intent that we are going to be taking over this function and paying directly. And I think Honorable Police is covering it very well, that it doesn't mean that we now as NSFAS are going to be, we are using the banking system to be able to do that, but we would then be assessing. Even now, when institutions were paying, it would still be NSFAS that assesses, based on the registration information, that this student ought to receive this much, this kind of allowance, and then you would then pass that to institutions to pay. But now we are going to be taking away that, call it third party that does the actual payment. Thank you, Chair. The last question, Chair, was for the DG, yes.
Chairperson, the question is whether the Minister did report to Parliament regarding the delays in the submission of financial statements by NSFAS. And the answer is yes, Chairperson, the Minister did. In the letter dated the 29th of September 2022, a letter that was directed to Mr. Amos Masondo, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. But on the 15th of December, the Minister also further updated the National Council of Provinces regarding the status of the audit of NSFAS. The second letter the Minister wrote on the 15th of December was directed to Honorable Nosiviwe Mabisa Ngagula, the Speaker of the National Assembly, on the 29th, firstly, but also later in December, an update in this regard. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think the Office of the Auditor General should take note of what is hanging on the allowance made in terms of the finalization and the tabling of the annual report in as far as the audit sign-off and finalization by the Office of the Auditor General. Just take note of that, and then we just give to members on these other items. Honorable Pauls.
It's Paulson, Chairperson. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, as I mentioned, I'm standing in for my colleague, the Honourable Mente, and Chairperson. So I have three questions to the SIU and one to the NSFAS. So I'd like to know from the SIU, from their preliminary investigations, whether the students that were awarded NSFAS funding erroneously, let's put it that way, in error, did they willfully mislead NSFAS in their NSFAS application? And how much of those NSFAS awards are as a result of a NSFAS employee colluding with the applicant? If that information is available yet. This is from the preliminary investigations, of course. The advocate also stated that it will take 18 months to complete the investigation, and you are going to investigate each of the 40,044 students who were erroneously awarded funding. So how much of those students make up that preliminary investigation that you reported on? And you're going to take 18 months to complete this investigation, so I'd like an indication as to how many you've completed since you started, and you have about 12 months left if you're going to complete the balance of that 40,044 students. And I'd also like to know from the SIU, the last question, of those that were part of your preliminary investigation, how many of them are from the missing middle? You know, those ones that they don't qualify for NSFAS, and they also can't afford to go. The parents can't afford to pay for them to go to university. Okay, how many of them are there? Because I can tell you, if my parents just earned 350,000 a year, I didn't qualify for NSFAS, I would be in trouble. So, okay, and then this one is for NSFAS. Are we at a stage where NSFAS can ensure that applicants who were recipients of social grants have a seamless application for NSFAS funding should they pursue tertiary education? Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you, Honourable Paulson. To the SIU, two questions referred to yourself, and then we get into NSFAS.
Thank you, Chair. As the investigation is ongoing, I'm going to allow my colleague to just indicate to the Honourable Committee whether there are those instances of students who willfully misled. If they did so, of course, they would fall under the category of fraud, committing fraud and all of that. But of course, we will still ensure that evidence is collected appropriately to determine that. But whether there are any instances up to now, I'm going to just hand over to my colleague who is overseeing the investigation to indicate that to the committee, including whether there's collusion between students and employees and so on. So we did mention that we are focusing also on determining whether there's collusion. But whether there's evidence already pointing to those, my colleague will indicate.
Thanks, Advocate, and thanks you, Chair. Honorable Member, we don't have the number for now, but in terms of willfully misled, there are some categories that we have identified whereby in some instances is the student who misrepresent their parent status when they apply by obtaining information from their grandparents or the uncle that is not getting enough money. And in some instances, you find, particularly on the money that is paid to the institution, you find that the institution also have some role to play because they submit the list to NSFAS, and only to find that some of the students are not at the institution anymore or they've dropped out. So that's the different category that we have found out of this. So the investigation currently is ongoing. We have identified some of them where we are obtaining the application form to see who signed, who completed the application form, so that we can able to see the liability as to who misled at that particular time. Some, they come out and say, of course, we did apply. I mean, the bursary was available, so we had to apply. So we will be dealing with them differently on that aspect. Then, in the issue of collusion, there is collusion, of course, because some of these funds is administered at the institution level, where some of the official at the institution, some they collude with the student, and we have seen much of this collusion, particularly on the issue of accommodation, where they collude with the outside accommodation provider to make sure that they inflate some of the accommodation that the student they stayed on. So that there's obviously the student will not work on their own. There are some enablers within the system that are enabling them to able to access some of this fund. And on the issue of the 40,000, the way we're going to deal with it, we're dealing with it systematically in a sense that we are utilizing several database so that we run the data and able to identify some of the red flags that we can easily deal with them. And the spread is about different provinces, of which provinces has prioritized their list. The other provinces have prioritized their list. So we're trying to deal with it in such a way that we can able to find data easily and eliminate some of the instances where there won't be need for us to be able to go and see the applicant. And also the application form, the information provided, enable us to be able to see whether indeed the student did qualify or not. In that way, it enables us to eliminate some of the members that we really don't necessarily need to see. Thank you.
No, thank you, Honorable Chair. Just on running the data, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, we do have, as my colleague indicated, we do have investigative tools that assist us to run the data at a reasonable speed, and the system is able to indicate instantly the outliers that the teams can now follow with investigations. But the system is able to flag when the rules are set up in the system to support a specific outcome of an investigation. It's able to indicate outliers and flags instantly, so it's able to assist with the numbers that will be fed in, and thereby assist in ensuring that we either shorten or meet the deadline of the investigations. With regard to the missing middle, we haven't really done that assessment. Yes, yeah, I'm sure the CEO could assist on that, but if there's a need for us to assist with that, we can probably also offer our assistance. Thanks.
Okay. NSFAS?
Sorry, I just missed out on one question that I just want to pose to the CEO of NSFAS. If I may.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'd like you to take us into confidence about the accommodation mafia and threats made on the life of the CEO, and what action has been taken to deal with the matter. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Over to you, CEO.
No, thank you, Chair. Chair, on the first question that Honourable Paulson asked, are we at a stage where social grants recipients can get funding easy? I'm really paraphrasing. Yes, Chair, we are there. SASSA applicants, as I indicated, we as soon as they apply and go through the application process, they get what we call a real-time funding decision. So as soon as they press submit in the application, because we do need the application information, they are I'm saying automatically funded, but they get the response immediately that they would be funded. Just out of interest, Chair, over 70% of our beneficiaries are actually SASSA beneficiaries that we have. Chair, in relation to the SMSs that I got, we referred these to we had a team that is busy doing a security assessment, so they are busy investigating those threats. Chair, thank you.
Okay. He asked a direct question. That question was direct in terms of the threats that have been somewhat leveled against the CEO. It might be that the interest goes even beyond the actual yes or no. What is it? It's what to know as to how further does that go, and what does the institution do in terms of following that up. I'm sure it's something that you need to think about as an institution, because you are not necessarily referred to yourself in terms of your threat analysis and all that stuff. The board responsibility to deal with those kinds of issues. But it's a critical question which was referred to the institution. Yeah. Can we allow the next? Honourable CY.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the colleagues. I have got two questions. I hope I'm audible. Naturally, my voice is
better now.
It's better. Thank you, Chair. On the SIU. You might not necessarily be able to give me what I'm going to ask or request. So you say your time frame is 18 months, so I'm trying to build a sequence so that you can understand. And I'm looking at the numbers which you say individually you should be able to follow. My first question would be, do you think you will be able to finish within the time allocated? The second one, which I'm linking to that, is that I am more interested in some form of a numerical quantification of, so far we have spent this amount of money to recover this amount of rent. That will assist us to be able to track the expenditure vis-a-vis the output. I'll make it a simple example for you. So next time when you come with a presentation, some form of a graph, I will give you an example that somebody would say, people don't pay for the e-tolls in Gauteng. The money which you will want to spend on following 5 rand vis-a-vis the logistics, we're either hiring a law firm to go and follow 100 rand while you are spending millions to hire a law firm. That's what I'm saying, you might not be able to sort of like create that graph. That would assist us so that we can know whether at the rate and pace that you're going, are we going to see the outcome. It would be a sad situation, Chair, where you find that in the financial constraints that you're complaining about and you're expressing about, you have a problem that actually we spend millions only to chase a drop in the ocean. So maybe if in the next lifetime. The other issue, it's in relation to the issue of capacity which you have raised. And I want to suggest it to you that I did not hear you fully in the presentation saying we've got a plan which we think will start at this particular time. It would appear that for some time you have internally acknowledged that we have got a problem of building internal capacity, and I'm glad, Advocate, when you were speaking about it, you vividly said it that, and when you outsource, it's costly. That let's work towards building that internal capacity, unlike acknowledging it and speaking more about it, and not some sense of saying, but we think in the next financial year we want to, either we are restructuring the organogram of the institution so that we can start addressing it. This is how we think we'll limit here, and also involve Treasury in the process. That will assist. So when you read the report, it looks quite pleasing, but the danger would be what I raised, that we're not sure the amount you're spending vis-a-vis the actually intended outcome. And in relation to the NSFAS, it's just only on one. So let's say it's the first slide, where you are speaking about. So numerically, if you look here, you are saying 14 you have finalized, 7 are in progress, and 16 you have not started. That's so. The number of those that you have not started is higher than any other. And you are just saying mainly due to human resource constraints that have been happening, you have been experiencing for 3 years. Would I be wrong to assume that from the first year you saw this problem, you carried it over to the next year and to the next year? What are the intentions to solve these financial constraints and the human resource constraints so that the number can reduce? I'm afraid that I want to play devil's advocate, unless you're going to do a quick job. So I'm afraid we might change the next financial year, sit here and say, no, now it's 4 years. We've got these constraints. What are the plans to address it so that we can be able to reduce this 16? Because it is high. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honourable Member. SIU, NSFAS.
No, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Honourable Member. The time frame, it's 18 months as determined by the project plan put together by the investigating team. We'll continue to monitor that with the view that we meet the deadline. So in terms of the spend so far, I just checked with my colleague quickly whether we have sent any invoice to the institution. In the invoice, there's a supporting documentation that goes with the invoice, that indicates the breakdown of what has been achieved to date, so that the institution could see what is it that it's paying for vis-a-vis the outcomes that we have reached. We are mindful about that economic model of not spending more to recover less. We are mindful about that, so that, and a question was raised earlier by Honorable Lees, at what point do we really determine whether we're going to have any recoveries or not? At the stage when we reach that, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, that there's a clear indication that there's not going to be any recoveries from anyone, we will then make that determination at that time. But I think the issue here is that the economic principle that you shouldn't spend more and recover less, we're quite aware of that. In fact, to date, I think we've recovered more than half of the costs that we intend to spend or intend to charge. We, at the rate that we are going, because we have indicated about 76 institutions involved, it might be, I'm just really saying, that there may be similar scenarios of the one where we've discovered, where we've recovered, or the money was paid back, and we believe that that money was paid as a result of the efforts that were made by the Special Investigating Unit. It might be that there might be similar scenarios where we'll then probably at the next hearing show that we have recovered more. So Honourable Chair and Honourable Member, we do take that into account, and we will ensure that we don't reach that stage where the state institution would be required to pay more and we don't recover. We will ensure that we monitor that space. In terms of the capacity, and this is more human resources capacity, and thanks for that question, we have indeed realized that to outsource to private companies, it's costly, and that is why from our human resources capacity model, we have ensured that the SIU, as we speak, is capacitated. We don't have private companies in this investigation in particular. There are, though, those instances where if there's specialized skills that we would normally not employ in the organization, and I'm not saying they probably arise here or not, but if we require specialist skills to assess a particular area of investigation, in an unlikely event that we have that here, then we will probably not have those specialists. But should we need a specialist that we don't ordinarily employ, we will then, of course, go out into the market to seek that specialist. But as we speak, and just to the honourable member's comment, we've come a while with the SIU restructuring, probably around 6-7 years ago, and we've been capacitating in line with the organogram or the organizational structure that we have determined. So the capacitation is going on to date. So with the objective of reducing outsourcing to private companies. Thank you.
I think in terms of the first question, Advocate, is more on the line when you have answered it. But the emphasis was that in terms of the presentation, if you could make such an economic outline, which would assist to know how far you are going in terms of balancing costs to the recoveries in terms of such a cost in a way. So when I did my rough calculation, just rough calculation, it came to, funny enough, looking into the 71 million and some odd in terms of your forecast, it's about R1.28 it's 174 rand 80 cents per student. Just a rough thing, without looking into other variables. 174 rand 80 cents. If you look into the 70 million against to the 40,000 students and odd. So roughly, it gets into that in terms of your actual charge. But there are other variables which you could probably be looking into, which could scale things even differently. As to whether that is fine or not fine, it's an order that we need to somewhat engage in. But if you look into the ball game, in terms of the ball, in relation to the total charge, it looks exorbitant. But if you get into the detail around that kind of a charge, something which we must get into the future, I think it will assist going forward. I think that's a question which she has been asking for in terms of the presentation. NSFAS.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, in terms of the capacitation, I think indeed, Chair, we from the point of administration, we had frozen, just for lack of a better word, new appointments, except to focus on really what were critical vacancies at the time, whilst we're waiting for the new board to review the organizational structure. That has since been done. What we are busy now, Chair, we have prioritized the appointment of those vacancies, particularly in internal audit and in the forensic department. So those are in the process of recruitment. Also, Chair, we follow what we call a co-sourcing model. Again, we've also, just because of capacity, budgetary constraints, have not been able to activate the assistance of external service providers. What has since changed, Chair, from a budget perspective, is that we applied to the department to use the money. So typically the money we get on recoveries, we are supposed to use strictly for student funding, but we've requested that we will be allowed to use a percentage of that towards our administration. So this is what has enabled us to be able to unlock some of this budget to be able to increase our capacity. So in essence, Chair, we in the next, because the recruitment process has started, the positions were advertised, they're in the process of being interviewed. And also because of the structure, the review of the structure, we've also done what we say internal placements. There are resources that have been also placed currently to increase the capacity within the forensics unit. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much on the questions which you have answered, both the SIU and NSFAS. Honorable Bucas.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to thank both the NSFAS and SIU for the presentations. And to the SIU, we acknowledge the progress in the investigations for the past 6 months. Chair, as much as we have concerns about the money paid for investigations, we need to follow up on state resources not reaching our poor and disadvantaged people. In SCOPA, we also have a duty to look after the resources of the state. And I specifically speak about that concern about the 70 million. To the SIU, in your opinion, how is the cooperation with the NSFAS, firstly? And I see that some of the risks identified, one is possible lack of cooperation from relevant officials, and then loss of memory by affected officials. That one, is it based on a professional opinion, or what is this loss of memory? And how regular are your engagements with them? Then secondly, Chair, what is the current status of monitoring measures, and how effective is the current systems in the institution? And are there process to develop security systems based on your recommendations as the SIU to prevent that this is not happening again whilst you are busy with the investigation? Some of my colleagues ask about the plus minus 40,000 students who did not qualify but they get the money. I want to know, are some of them still in the institutions? And in your investigations, will you be able to discover if it is indeed the student who applied for the money? Because I was listening to the response on the signature and what else, but I think from my view it will be a very difficult exercise to identify that it is indeed those students who, and what will the effect be on the moral of those students if it is not them who, you understand what I want to ask. Then my question to NSFAS is that, I think Honorable Tembi asked it also, but in the words of the chairperson, he was saying that it's natural to be concerned about the cost of money paid for investigations, but she speak about the capacity constraints. And in the response of the CEO, he said that there is appointments now. I'm trying to understand why frozen jobs or appointments whilst you appoint service providers. And what is the cost of those service providers in the time frame that you appoint the service providers? And then when did you install the hotline, and how effective is that hotline? I'm trying to understand, because for me, the example that the CEO, so the CEO was the CFO, he was saying that some of the people phoned and said my neighbor received money. I don't think it's effective enough, because the problem is not on the outside. The problem is in the inside. Your systems to prevent that money is paying outside. Now, so how effective is the hotline, and how will the hotline stop what is happening within NSFAS? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. NSFAS, then SIU. I'm changing the line.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think, firstly, in terms of how long has the hotline has been in place, Chair, it has been a hotline that was in place even prior to administration, where people are able to report. It's normally, I think many institutions call it the Vuvuzela hotline, where anyone reports any matters of fraudulent activity. And we are also effective where we then respond to those matters that have been reported, Chair. Chair, from the point of using of service providers, I should firstly indicate, Chair, that the last time we appointed service providers to assist us was around 2019, where we use service providers to investigate some of these cases. It does, Chair, from time to time become necessary for us to do so, given the technical nature of some of the matters that we have to deal with. However, since that time, we've endeavored to use internal capacity. However, we do have a panel that is available of forensic investigators. The need for this panel, Chair, is as and when we want to be able to bolster our capacity, and depending on the amount of work that we have to do, then we are able to tap into that resource. Chair, from a cost perspective, of course, in the short term, just as an indication, the cost of investigation would be high where you are using a consultant, but in the long term, where you have an internal resource, you need to make sure that you have enough budget to cover that resource for the duration of their employment. So that's normally what we balance, but just a straight answer is that we haven't used external consultants for investigations since 2019. Even then, we were dealing with some of the technical matters during administration. Chair, indeed, the issues were, and I think this relates to the first question that Honorable Liz asked, where how is it that students were able to access this undue funding? It's because at the time, we had no systems to verify the parental information. We had no systems to verify the income. As I indicated, Chair, that now we have improved our system such that we have these third-party systems that we rely on. Of course, it's not without its own weaknesses, given that we rely on the data that has been provided to us by those third parties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. NSFAS, you see some of the questions which are asked while they are looking into pertinent matters, they are futuristic as well. So when we consider such questions, they reflect in the systemic instance as to what is it that need to be looked into going forward. Because when we deal with these matters, we might be tempted to say, let's protect ourselves, because the question has been asked, you see, and the nature of response would be, let's close up around this matter. But the interest is more than that. You are involved in a social related function. You offer that function for education, and therefore the interest is going to grow. As it grows, the demand is growing, and the creeping elements of risk are as well improving, because they compete with that kind of interest. So the level of your functionality within that kind of a situation need agility. So when we probe these questions, let's probably give ourselves that notion that our interest is not to get you into a corner, but is to get you through such inquisitive mind for innovation, improvements out there, so that things should happen to improve the will of operational capability. So I would really want to urge ourselves to focus around that, because if you look at those questions, they are somewhat like that, getting out there. NSFAS? SIU?
No, thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Biekus. The cooperation by NSFAS, and I would also say the department, it's really excellent. NSFAS, as the chair of the board, Mr. Koza has indicated, we have had interaction with the institution. The CEO has been quite helpful. The team on an ongoing basis engages with the institution, so there are no issues there. And if there were, the team would probably have indicated to me, and I would have indicated to the CEO and the DG, and those would be resolved. Really not to be mentioned at this stage. Loss of memory, Honorable Biekus, I think there, on the risk analysis that was done by the team, usually it really also indicates to the length of time it takes that you'll find that witnesses don't have a, sort of a clear recollection of the matters at hand, but that's why we need to really ensure that we complete the investigation as speedily as possible. But also, when the team engages with potential witnesses, they would, of course, engage them with a view that, are they able to get evidentiary statements from the witnesses, But the speed at which we complete and the speed at which we investigate would mitigate the loss of memory. It's really called loss of memory, but in a sense, it means that witnesses cannot really remember and so on. It's not pathological. Monitoring measures in the institution. We have really picked up in the presentation by the DG and the CEO that most of the issues that we have indicated in our systemic recommendations and the observations already are receiving attention, and we are really pleased with that. Now, of these students, the 40,000 odd students, how do we ensure that from an investigation perspective, and I'm understanding the question, Honourable Chair and Honourable Beckers, to say, how do we ensure that the evidence points to the relevant student without running the risk of pronouncing or making findings against a wrong student, in which case it would affect the student consent. So the investigation is conducted such that there is an analysis process, and the investigating team will come in where they get, and I'm told they work closely with NSFAS to determine which students have been paid, the basis thereof, and so on, just to ensure that when findings are made that this has been irregularly or unduly paid, we point to the correct student. It's really critical that we do so to avoid pointing to wrong students and thereby having unintended consequences. I don't know, Mr. Lekgetho would like to, or Ms. Meller, just to indicate high level on how we go about, assessing the students.
Thank you very much.
The mic.
Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, Honourable Beckers, your question in terms of how we identify these 40,444 students, due to our engagements that our head has alluded to, our various engagements that we meet monthly with the internal forensic unit of NSFAS, they supplied us with the information as they did a comparison analysis in terms of comparing SARS data to students that have been funded. Those students that are above the threshold, that's just purely one of the examples. Those are the students that they've given that information to us so that we can go and follow up. And then obviously our rationale of how we're going to approach these 40 students. So these 40,000 students have definitely, the data analysis has revealed that there are irregularities that we just need to go and follow up on. In terms of very practically obtaining the application forms, the information that was supplied to NSFAS, that they are below the threshold, and all of the regulations that they had to adhere to. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Advocate and your team, NSFAS, the Chair of the Board, the DG, CEO. If you look into page 20 of the presentation by SIU, it deals with potential systemic recommendations, which tells the story of the breakage of the system, which allows the faults which are under investigation currently. And therefore, if nothing is done in terms of those systems, perpetually, we are going to get into the similar perpetual environment. So it becomes so critical that the plan by NSFAS should incrementally look into the application around those system failures and ensure that the recommendations which have been made, because taking into consideration that the SIU is still in the process of making those investigations. So the next question by us, when you come around, would be how far, because these have been identified currently as of now, meaning therefore these should filter through your plan. You see, so some kind of a plan should be undertaken to deal with these recommendations without waiting for the actual finalization of the investigation. Is key. But then, colleagues, it goes and cuts deeper. You see, I watched the minister trying to explain how they make approvals for IDs, for passports, during this recent saga, which has been that publicized in the country. And through that, you'd find out that these kinds of failures, the state had an outlook that there is an institution called SITA, which is responsible to provide capacity in as far as the basics, in as far as IT is concerned. And if that institution is not assisting government overall, those system failures are going to continue over time. So it might be necessary that at some stage would have to invite SITA and ask SITA about these questions, because the agency is on how they begin to assist various departments to fulfill their own functioning based on e-governance, and how they fast-track such processes. And what we see with NSFAS is exactly what falls into their own laps around those matters. And the one other critical area which I think, take into consideration what the Honourable Member Paulson has asked, which is the policy matter around the missing middle. So the investigations would deal with these other matters, but they somewhat infuse into our own policy directive. If you're going to save an amount of about 5 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion, this amount is unaccounted for, is lost, or what have you, and you'll find out that those who are the players there, their interest is in education, and they commit such illegal acts for the end benefit, which is education. What does that say into the policy instruments that we have to begin to think about in our service to serve them in a way, so to fulfill what is the actual need. So while we deal with those things without creating some kind of incrimination in as far as looking into such an outlook, so it ought to permeate our policy environment to deal with those matters, DG. That how is our policy accommodative, so that you should be on your risk-averse environment, begin to deal with those things in terms of the policy drive. A key area which we need to think about going forward. And the last thing, I think Honourable Lisa has dealt with this question. If indeed there is a huge risk in as far as accommodation is concerned, even there ought to be a better approach in terms of management drive when it comes to that necessary service for the students to be accommodated quite appropriately, and those who are playing their part in that environment are made to conform into the legal prescripts set by such universities, NSFAS, and the country overall. So we really need to look into the agency around such. And then the small question for me would be that in all what you are doing here, are there any students who have been denied assistance on the basis of absence of such funds, that though I qualify, find myself in a situation where you would say there's no money, would assist you, there's no money. You see, and what is that number, if you have it, and probably if you could, probably in a later stage, provide us that kind of a scenario. I loved when Honorable Bukas asked a question about loss of memory, and if you could look into the files in 1987, someone was on the dock and was consistently saying, "I don't remember. I don't remember." You see, and ended up getting 4 years in prison because of failure of memory. You see, so there are some of those things. So I was not necessarily laughing into what you were trying to say, but I remembered 1987. You see, someone on the dock saying, "I don't remember." You see, so that's what it is. Thank you very much. If you could just answer me that question, and then thereafter we can have a 5-minute break, and then we get into the presentation on the Skills Fund. It's going to be a very short presentation and a short debate discussion on the Skills Fund. NSFAS?
No, thank you, Chair. Chair, maybe let me start off by taking the opportunity to indicate that I think all the inputs from members, we take it as constructive, that these are matters that we need to look into going forward and to continue to strengthen the controls that we have in place as the organization. Secondly, Chair, to indicate that there is no instance where we have not funded a student on the basis that there is no money. You would recall, Chair, that at least in the last, not this academic year, in the previous academic year, we had delayed issuing funding decisions because we had then at the time assessed that there wouldn't be enough funds to cover all the students. So basically what we do to determine the funding, Chair, we first do a projection of how many applicants are we likely to get, and based on that number, we then also look at the enrollment targets that have been set by the department and the number of factors. Then we determine what is needed. So hence, we find that there is no instance where we are able to say to students they are not funded because we've run out of money. What typically becomes the case, Chair, is those that are second, during the year, for example, after we've made the funding decisions, you may find that there's a desire for some to apply, but at that point, because the budget has already been set, we are not able to accommodate. But generally, there is no student that we deny on the basis of shortage of funds. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. DG?
Chairperson, there's much more to be said about NSFAS and the road they've traveled to improve governance from the time that is within the scope of investigation by SIU to the period of this current board and this current management. I think on another day, both the chair and the CEO would say most of the issues that are currently under investigation emanate from the period before their term. But they've taken full responsibility and accountability to ensuring that notwithstanding that they are fully into the applying themselves into their responsibility. But I do need, Chair, to also speak as the accounting officer of the department and say that currently we have come to a conclusion that the current funding model is not sustainable over time. I think because of this, the minister appointed the ministerial task team to look into the development of a comprehensive student funding model. I am happy to report that has submitted to Cabinet. Cabinet has advised that we consult, and we are now at the final stages of consultation, and we are ready to go back to Cabinet and say these are the proposals to improve on the model, so that those who are outside of this funding model, as a result of the limitations of the resources at our disposal, are also looked into. And particularly, Chairperson, the focus is on the missing middle, because it is important at some point that this is resolved. We are working with the Banking Association of South Africa, to try and also say that they must come to the party. We are working with the National Treasury to assist us to say, is it possible that we could guarantee loans, for example, a loan system for those who are currently not being funded in this regard. Some of them would be NSFAS beneficiaries who would already have graduated, but they cannot register second degrees and so forth. So we are really looking at a wider scope of coverage of those who cannot afford, with the interest of ensuring that this country improves its look in terms of the skills that are necessary for the economy. Chairperson, thank you very much. I think we, at that point, submit to you with an indication that matters which have been raised by the honourable members that may not have been fully responded to, we would be ready to even do that in writing if it is necessary for us to do so. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much. Is that policy published for those who are of interest to comment on?
Oh, Chairperson, the report is with us now, ready to be tabled to Cabinet, and so it's going to be. We are ready. We can share the report because it's a public report at this point in time. Of course, we are trying to manage it because it's a cabinet process, to making sure that we reach that point. I think Cabinet will then say, let's publish, of which then we will open to South Africa. There are 28 recommendations that at implementation, I'm confident that we will come around the issues that we are confronted with. Chair, the one issue that I wish to just say is that as a department, one issue that is important to us now is to say graduates through this massive investment by government, how relevant are the skills that we are developing to the needs of our economy? And I think that is actually the fundamental question going forward, because I think we are on the verge of taking serious decisions around who we fund. And at that point, when we take that decision, we will need to have consulted very widely in the country, because a lot of people will fall outside. Because if you look at those that are not unemployed currently, young people, 3.4 million young people that are not in education, not in any type of training, or not employed. 3.4 million is 3.4 million too many. And so it is crucial for us to move towards that direction, and we will be happy at some point in future to come here and present the progress we are making with that kind of work.
Thanks, DG, but we must as well note that it starts at the lower level. Just to push them off the pipe, once you have not given what you need higher up, is futile. So you must start at the basic education level to say these are the skills that are needed by the country. So curriculum development, those are policy matters which I don't have to reflect on, but just for interest, just to say it will really start there. You can strangle them at the upper, higher level. But that's good progress. I think if that's a level, let's appreciate that. 1 minute, Chair of the Board.
Thank you so much, Chair. Just two things from me quickly. The first, it's the suggestion from the SIU on going back to 2013. I think that would be very useful for context, because much as the problems, according to the scope, started in 2016, going back 2 years earlier will provide us some context. The last one, quickly, Chair, it's on the value of the work that is done by the SIU, which I can quickly summarize as follows to respond to the question that was raised by the honorables earlier on. One, it's recovery. The second, it's deterrence to those that were involved in fraudulent activities. But the third, and a very important one, it's the identification of all the loopholes that led to all this. Whilst the two other reasons cannot constitute a bookkeeper's entry, but I think they've got huge financial benefits in that if we're able to identify this is what all these fraudsters employed to do this or that, we are able to avoid that. And in that manner, even if the SIU in bookkeeping entry has not achieved a certain amount, that will be a very great financial benefit to the institution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairperson. The Office of the AG, do you have any comment to make in terms of the progress made so far? Then we close up around such.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I'll provide that update. We do confirm that we received the updated submission of the financial statements and supporting documentation from NSFAS on the 31st of March. Our communication to NSFAS is indeed that this is not an extension, but allowing an updating and adjusting of the financial statements. The communication is that the audit will be completed by the 30th of June for 2022, and also confirmation that the current audit is also underway. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Okay, I think let's note all those kinds of development. Would have wanted to interact with those kinds of things, but the basis of improvement of governance is well acceptable. This institution has been under administration for some time, and if there's a level of improvement around such, in terms of the board and appointments, and looking into the senior executives who are very key in terms of functionality, and you have heard how the members have tabled their own questions in terms of the interest, just to improve that capacity and to improve the level of accountability in the institution itself. We handle quite a lot of money for the interest of education of those who want to better their future, and the country is dependent on that future. So we somewhat appreciate the level of indulgence on the area of dealing with those weaknesses which we have experienced in the past. We hope for the better future, and here are the things which lie in front of you to deal with, to avert such a crisis environment. Thank you very much for coming, and we are going to get into the presentation on the Skills Fund after we've had a break for 5 minutes and come back. Thanks, Advocate. You are still here? Yes.
Sometimes you want to check. I hate this thing from charity. No, I wanted to ask a number of questions.
What's stopping you?
So I've been, no man, people have asked them differently. So I can't get that in. Hey, so let's allow this. That was a very quick Oh, okay.
Chair, thank you so much.
Yes, thanks.
I can sense you were an educated.
At some point. At some point, you said that my interest is really that we must have this thing right.
Yeah, no.
And if it's going to serve, say, a wider populist of our youth. All the best. Yeah. Thank you.
happy that as the members have applied our mind on the areas of interest, and therefore it was justifiable that we should take that a kind of time to deal with those matters. So thank you very much, colleagues. The second area of our indulgence is the area that relates to the National Skills Fund. Yesterday, I read the President's letters. The topic was on the national skills related approach, which looked into the availability of recorded funds to support youth in terms of the skills which are going to drive them towards economic functionality. And I thought about this meeting when we are going to meet with the department that is responsible for such. And our main worries around the capacity and the financial capability and accountability on those related skills development areas. And for the better instances of our session today is the focus on the progress so far. We've had a meeting before the close of the year, and in that meeting there are certain decisions that we took, and our interest is summarily as to whether is there any progress around those specific decisions, and then we allow members to ask questions with relations to that. One, a report was tabled to us, which was a forensic report by the department. We looked into that report. We had time to have engagement on the report, but there were some areas we felt that there are areas which are so necessary to look into the improvements around areas of that investigation. And in appreciation of that forensic report, then the outlook at the time was such that a number of institutions must work together, which includes the SIU, and secondly, we appreciated that the Hawks already have been engaged by the department, and therefore all those areas must be dealt with quite well. Welcome, Tlegas. You're more than welcome.
I enjoyed my joyride to PE.
I know you would have wanted to go to PE over time. So you had that wish in a different form. In a more serious note, we're now at the point of getting into the Skills Fund presentation. We've just finished one presentation that deals with the areas of NSFAS. So thanks for your arrival, Honorable Chair. I was given this responsibility in your absence. It therefore lies on you whether you want me to continue because you are here.
I think it's fine, continue.
Okay, thank you very much. No, I'm a Gunya and was. Yeah, I would have loved you to take over your responsibility. Nevertheless, if that's the case, let me then continue. So as part of those recommendations, resolutions by the committee, so the question is asked, how far have we gone in terms of those decisions of the committee? Fortunately, the DG was present in the meeting, and it's only the Hawks that I don't see. They were present in that meeting, and the SIU is as well present. Yeah. In the same way, how far are you, SIU?
Yes, we can take the committee. Sorry. We can take the committee through on how far we are.
Yes.
Since the last meeting, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, we considered the report, the forensic report, but we also considered other sources in terms of just determining whether there's a basis on which SIU could further investigate. So, Honourable Chair, we've done that. On doing so, we have determined that there's a basis on which SIU can investigate. And we have since drafted the proclamation. The proclamation has been sent through the process that will lead to it landing to the President's office. The process is firstly goes to the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, and then thereafter onward to the President. So we just took the liberty of just indicating to the committee parts of the draft proclamation that we have put together, and in the main, it's the part that is projected to the Honourable Committee now. It's what were the sources that we looked at in determining what SIU still needs to investigate. So you'll see there, that's paragraph 4 of the draft proclamation. That really indicates the sources of the information. As you can see, we looked at the presentation to SCOPA by the department and the report that was prepared, the forensic report. In the report, we identified that the report indicated that there are further investigations that were required. We also included those matters in the proclamation. So in 4.3, we really just indicate that importantly, the private investigating company that did the investigation did not possess, well, this is ordinarily known really, they don't possess statutory powers of investigation, and their investigation was thus hamstrung in its efforts to conduct a comprehensive investigation which would yield forensic evidence that could be used for purposes of litigation to recover and other purposes. Sorry. The report also raised issues around access to necessary information, such as bank statements, as a limitation in the report. We also obtained the Auditor General's report, the final management reports in relation to the fund. These reports were dated the 31 March 2020, 31 March 2021, and 31 March 2022. So these are, amongst others, the information that we indicate in the proclamation we have looked at and therefore came to a finding that there's further investigation that needs to be done. Without going further into the proclamation, we found that, or we do mention in the proclamation, so that the President is aware, that the department has indicated that they've referred a number of matters to the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation for further investigations. And we've indicated to the President, as we ordinarily do, that we take that into account, but of course that is not an impediment for the proclamation to be signed. So we've done that so that the President is aware. There are matters in which where we indicate, and those would be covered in the schedule to the proclamation when it's issued. We just didn't really prepare to show them because they involve a number of companies, and names are mentioned of those companies, and they actually count up to about 10 projects in the proclamation. Now, of course, we do mention that we'll investigate also any improper or unlawful conduct by officials or employees of the fund or the state, or any other applicable supplier. So to a large extent, if the proclamation is signed and we do start the investigation and we pick up that there are other suppliers or other names that are mentioned, we would like the proclamation to enable us to investigate those other companies. So Honourable Chair, that's really the basis of how we determined that there are areas that we still need to investigate. We have informed the Minister in a letter dated the 28th of February that we are busy with the proclamation, and we informed the Minister and the DG in one of the one-on-one meetings we had that the proclamation is now being processed. So we are at that stage now where we'll, as SIU, will wait until the proclamation is signed, and then we'll kick off the formal investigation once it's signed and gazetted. And I'm aware that the Minister really did raise the issue around the costs, which I think we addressed in the previous presentation, showing how is it that we compare with the private sector and so on, and we'll continue to bear that in mind as we kick off the investigation. Honourable Chair, I'll pause here and just really check if there are any questions. It's a process issue now. The proclamation is gone through. Once it's signed, we're going to kick off the investigation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate, the DG.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's not like sitting in the plane, eh? Yeah, sitting in the boardroom. Yeah. That's right. The DG, sorry about that.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Recognizing the Chairperson of the committee who's joined us.
The real Chairperson of the committee.
At the right time for that matter. Chairperson, I think if I were to present the parts that refers to SIU, I will repeat exactly what the advocate has said. I think it is very clear that the Department of Higher Education and Training work with all its agencies that are responsible in government for investigations, and we support the work they do because we know they complement our own work. And in this regard, I'm happy that the progress is not reported by us, but it's reported by the SIU itself. I trust that that will therefore rest the issue around the cooperation of the department with any other law enforcement in this regard. And therefore, what remains for us, Chairperson, as I can see it, is just to assure members about other aspects that are not related to the investigation, but are much more about improving governance at NSF, first and foremost, but secondly, just an update on the internal processes, departmentally, how far we are. And in this regard, may I assure you, Chair, that we will also be reporting progress equally in that regard. So our presentation is in three parts. The first part is the Ministerial Task Team report and its implementation. The task team that was tasked to look into the operational model of the NSF, an initiative of the Minister, and at which then that report has been implemented, and we will provide members with the progress thereof. Chairperson, in that regard, allow me, in the interest of time, to call upon the Chief Executive of NSF, Mr. Mabusela, to take us through very briefly and at high level, the three parts of the reports that I've suggested. Mr. Mabusela.
Thanks very much, TG.
You want to come and sit here? The screen is freezed. Can I show you it's that one, it's not ours.
Let's put it in there. Skills fund. Skills.
Okay. Yeah, thanks very much, TG. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and Honorable Chair, and honorable members, as well as my colleagues. I'll quickly just go through, Chair, the internal processes that are supporting the configuration. My apologies, Honorable, Advocate Butibi. Yes, the internal processes, Chair, that are supporting the reconfiguration of the NSF, as you have rightfully said to say, the President has just articulated on the critical role that the NSF plays with respect to developing skills in the country just recently, and the need for this entity to basically function at the level that is required to meet that objective. This is, Chair, against that background that the Minister, it would be remembered that he then commissioned a ministerial task team that was specifically looking at the reconfiguration of the NSF with respect to the broader business operating model of the NSF, the governance structure of the NSF, and so forth. And that report was done and completed and presented to the minister, and the DG was then assigned to implement the report. And then he proceeded then to set into place internal processes then that would then ensure the implementation of the report. The part one of that report, Chair, I'm just going through the summary thereof, Chair. Yeah, because I believe that the report is available for a greater detail. But then the part that we're dealing with in this presentation, it is not necessarily the report itself, the content thereof, but it is the implementation of the report as the next critical stage. Chair, what we then did out of the directive of the Director General as the accounting authority internally, we then set out to implement the report. And the report then had to be disaggregated into those work streams. There are actually 5, not 4, those 5 work streams, which is the governance work stream, the business model, operating model, and value chain work stream, strategy, innovation, and organizational performance work stream, human resource work stream, as well as the change management work stream. Now, Chair, there are in the detailed draft plan, there are actually finer activities that are indicated in the plan with the respective timelines to achieve those set out activities as well as the targets. For an example, if I were to take the governance work stream, the governance work stream, Chair, its main mandate here is basically to look at the current governance structure of the NSF with respect to the provision of the National Treasury as has been enlisted as a Schedule 3A entity, and also to look at the Skills Development Act with respect to the definition now of the NSF as an entity in terms of its governance structure. If you look at that act, it gives the option of in fact the PFMA gives 2 options, but then the one expressed by the Skills Development Act is the one that makes the Director General, for an example, as the accounting authority, whereas you could have also a board. So the governance work stream, in terms of the MTT report, is basically looking at how then the recommendation that comes out there, because the recommendation from that report to the minister has a slant rather to a board rather than a legislated state entity in the form of the DHEAD as the accounting authority. So it then becomes the prerogative of the minister then to say, within this recommendation, how do we then navigate the NSF in a manner that will meet the mandate of the entity. So this governance stream is looking at those nitty-gritties, Chair, to say what would be then implementable or fit for purpose within the NSF environment. And then if you look at the timelines that we have projected, Chair, to achieve this, initially they were very tight, but then based on the fact that legislative processes, they include a very long process, passage of external consultation and so forth, and therefore that was categorized as a long-term objective simply because of the purpose of consultation with respect to changing the act or legislation. Chair, then the other work stream, the business model, as well as the operating and value chain model. That one, Chair, is the work stream that looks at the core now, the core function of the NSF, with respect to the current business processes that are there. So what this stream has done thus far is basically to make an assessment of as is business operating model of the NSF, the SOPs that are there, and then look at the gaps that exist vis-a-vis in comparison to what the MTT report is saying. Now, once that is done, Chair, that process, this team will then be able to implement then and adopt a business process as well as the standard operating procedures that will then easily compartmentalize or categorize the processes that are involved in the NSF value chain. We must remember that the NSF value chain, Chair, is very broad. Start from SDP application, skills development provider applications, as well as other interested parties, even State Department applications, right up to the disbursement of funds. It's a huge value chain, and therefore it has to express very succinct and clear business operating procedures so that there could be accountability. So this stream, Chair, is specifically looking at the model as it exists now and as expressed by the MTT report, and then implement those recommendations that are suggested in the report itself. And we're looking at having covered some ground by the end of this current year, around November, Chair. And then, and then the other business, the work stream, the strategy and innovation one, that one, Chair.
Just there. The difficulty is to looking into your presentation. We take it that is the summary. Yes. Of what the minister's intentions are in as far as reviewal of the structure of NSF is concerned. It's well and fine, you see, but one would be, I'm sure the members here would love to point them at the progress that relates to other matters. The minister spoke about this, that has made some reference to a task team which is going to look into the reconfiguration of the institution, one way or the other. You have spoken on it. You have summarily indicated those kinds of areas. It might be of interest for us to have that kind of a document, though it's a matter of reference to the portfolio committee in detail, because it deals with the ministerial policy directive in that end. If you could point us on what we dealt with in the previous meeting, that these are the areas that we have dealt with, this is where we are, and looking into those matters. I would urge you to assist us in handling that, please.
No, that's noted. The directive that you are giving, Let me rather then conclude then to say quite a number of what we have done thus far, both with respect to this MTT report. There are other concurrent processes that have already been happening. For an example, within the human resource stream, which I will then indicate that in that respect, that was the question of capacity. How far have we gone with respect to closing the capacity gaps that are within the NSF? I will present that, Chair, within the audit action plan that then integrates, this report integrates with the AG's report. And obviously then the change management stream thing, it is the futuristic thing. As we move through the process thereof. And obviously, Chair, within that business model, what we have done thus far, that is also expressed within the audit action plan. As I'm saying that these things run concurrently. Where in the audit action plan, for example, you'll find issues that relate to financial controls as well as financial reporting. And therefore, the question is, thus far, how far have we gone? I'll touch on that in the audit action plan itself as directed by you, Chair. I think those will then satisfy.
Chair, may I crave your indulgence momentarily to ease my confusion? That presentation is not the one we have here, unless there have been changes.
Yeah. I've been looking into
the presentation before us is not the presentation that is there, and I think in the absence of a cross-referencing document, it should be very difficult to follow even that one, because to get into the audit action plan, Chair. But all I was just saying is that we don't have that.
Yeah. If you look into the presentation that we have, the elements of what you were presenting in the previous slide in page 7, and then what you are coming up with is in following page 8. The question which has made me to intervene earlier on was on the point which Honourable Chair is dealing with in terms of points of emphasis, just to level those areas for the intention of the committee to be able to deal with. And the accounting authority, DG in this instance, present us with a summary. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think earlier on when we were setting up the presentation, we used a different computer. Clearly not the updated report, but I can just summarize it for you.
Please.
Chairperson, I think the last time we presented to the honourable members regarding the internal processes of our department, first and foremost, we indicated that we have departmentally started a process of setting up an independent panel that looks into consequence management, to hold accountable officials that are implicated in the report. And we indicated our intention at that point to suspend those officials that are indicated in the report. That was the last time we presented, Chairperson. I think today what we are saying is that all of those officials that are implicated in the report have been charged. All of them have responded to the charges preferred against them. And I think most importantly that hearings are currently underway regarding their opportunity to present their side of the story. And we are right towards the end of that process. Our anticipation, Chairperson, is that the evidence coming through will implicate much bigger numbers of people that are indicated. Obviously, as we move on, we will cross-reference the work that is done by the SIU, the work that is done by the Hawks, and further as you as we have said earlier on, that the scope of the investigation will include all matters that the AG has raised. And therefore, we expect that whereas currently those that are suspended and are going through our internal processes, the progress is reported, but we are looking forward to those who are implicated through the expanded mandate of the scope of the AG's recommendations that looks into the 2021 report right up to the last audit report, so that there is no one who escapes the accountability. I'm happy to report that progress, Chairperson, and I think that that is what part 2 of our presentation is. Part 3 is the audit action plan, which pound for pound says this is what the Auditor General said needs to be done, and this is what we have done. And I think that is what the Chief Executive would be saying now. Mr. Mausa.
Thanks very much, DG, and also thanks, Chair, for bringing that up. This is the correct presentation now. And then let me then skip over to part 3 of the presentation. The assertion that I made, Chair, is that if you interface the 3 components, the audit action plan actually looks at what the AGSA has said, as well as the MTT report, as well as the results of the forensic report. In essence, the AGSA findings, they kind of confirm the systemic issues that are there within the NSF. And thus far, these are the things, Chair, that we have done to address the internal systemic issues that should contribute at making the NSF operate as an effective and efficient organization. If you look at the first finding that came from the AG that was critical and cross-cutting, it related to the capacity issue within the NSF. The vacancy rate was quite high, and I'm actually happy to report that to date we are chunking, Chair, bit by bit the vacancies that are there within the organization. To date, of the 35 posts, that 69, we're counting up to 35 now. As of this period, there's also further progress of interviews that are sitting and so forth. What is critical in this area, Chair, of capacity, the NSF didn't have a chief financial officer for quite some time, and an appointment was made last year, November. I'm just touching on the critical areas of functionality. The fund manager was also appointed in 20. That's a critical post in the sense that the fund manager actually integrates the STPs as well as the NSF with respect to the flow of funds. And in the absence of a fund manager, there's actually a very serious gap with respect to the flow of funds. The expenditure against the deliverables cannot be properly accounted for. The director for IT has also been appointed. That's another critical area, Chair, with respect to what was raised by the AG, with respect to lack of information availability within the NSF. These are other positions, Chair, that we're currently involved in filling them. And as I'm saying that at the next session, the filling of vacancy rate will be much lower than this. And then the second finding related to the financial issues, Chair, with respect to NSF, where the AG reported that the NSF found it difficult to report their previous year accruals, the infrastructure assets, trades, and receivables, as well as deferred expenditure provisions. It was just that myriad of findings around the finances of the NSF, and simply because there was no proper application of the GRAP standards. And I'm happy to report that though it's not a good achievement, but then since this finding, it was a recurrent finding, we then proceeded to get an AG finding that moved from a disclaimer now to a qualified audit with findings. As I'm saying, it's a progress, but a progress not really wanting to take us where we want to be, meaning that these issues that related to financial reporting were addressed based on those bullets that have been indicated there, particularly the continuous reconciliation chair of financial records on monthly basis. It's an occurrence that was not there, and at the end of the line you then have a huge unmanageable financial documents internally. Hence the AG found us wanting in this respect. The third finding, Chair, it related to institutional limitations with regards to the availability of performance information, where his scope was limited. He could not successfully declare whether our institutional performance was what it was required, simply because of the limitation of scope, the misstatements that were there, the lack of responsiveness to requests for information, as well as the or adequate response to COFs, which was not happening, as well as IT control environment. Since then, Chair, we have addressed these issues. We no longer have issues with respect to RFIs. When the AG requests information from us, he gets it. And when he issues a finding with respect to a COF, we respond to that, Chair. And up to this stage now, we're quite okay with respect to addressing these limitations. And then also on the IT system, which is Microsoft Dynamics, we're building up that system, Chair, progressively. And we know that at least by next year, we'll be able to have a very firm, mid next year, we'll be able to have a very firm IT system within the NSF, which will largely relate to the storage of information. And then the fourth finding related to the skills development implementation itself, the skills development providers, the information that relates to them, the information that was used, for an example, by the forensic to go there and extract it and see whether what was applied for was properly used. There was limitation there, Chair, which was also discovered by the AG, in the sense that there was absence of proper record keeping. And we've undertaken all these processes, as indicated, Chair, there, to ensure that at skills development provider level, they are able to have this full portfolio of information that is required to verify their expenditure as dispersed to them. Proceeding, Chair, on governance, on the governance part, this area, Chair, was largely indicating the fact that we were very slow in processing our determination tests. And that has been addressed, Chair, in terms of internal audit. The findings that came from the AG, they are actually processed now. There are STPs that have been found wanting, and we've proceeded then to recoup monies from them with respect to the findings of the AG. Obviously, that process is initiated through internal audit process by conducting the determination test. This is critical, Chair, simply to close the legalities that may arise if you simply just go without performing these tests. And the last critical point, Chair, is that one of the risk register that we have developed now as the NSF, which we are able now to assess our risk, unlike previously where it was the extension of the D8 risk register. But we have now our own risk register as an NSF, which is reviewed continuously. That's the conclusion, Chair, that is given there with respect to the issues of the NSF moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I take it you are the CEO currently, acting CEO currently from the department.
Yes, Chair.
From the department.
Yes, from the department.
But now currently acting.
Yes.
Okay. Colleagues, that's the brief report on areas of interest, covering the AG findings and what is the actual progress around those matters. Honorable Liz, Honorable Chair, Hlengwa, Honorable Sue, those three hands.
Thank you, Mr. Real Chair. Just a quick one, Mr. Chairman. On slide 8, I think ours are the same versions now. There's a comment there that indicates somewhat difference of opinion between Advocate Matibi and you guys, because not slide 8. Sorry, I've got the wrong slide. I would just find the right one. 6, is it? 6. Yeah, slide 6. So Advocate has reported that basically the application for a proclamation has been submitted, and we're waiting for the President. I think that's the way it works. But here on this slide, you're saying that we have met with the SIU to seek clarity from them and remained of the view that an SIU investigation would not be the best use of limited public resources. And we did have that conversation earlier today about the costs of SIU investigations, but I think here it's more about not the cost, but whether or not there should actually be an SIU investigation at all. Or has there been a change in the position of the NSF since this report to us was done? Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Gigi, you made a comment earlier on as part of affirming SIU's presentation. I think the question relates to that.
All right. Chairperson, I think the slide is falling behind the developments. I think the comments by the Advocate Motivi is the most accurate capturing of the status quo. We come from far, and we are here now.
Okay.
Far apart.
Basuka kude. Yeah. Honorable the Chair Hlengwa.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I think formally let me just apologize. The inconvenience was well beyond my control. But thank you for holding the fort. Chair, no, I just want to build up on what Umazambane has said. I take the point that the presentation is overtaken by events, right? But for me, the issue is the sentiment, in that the issue has always been the SIU investigating. So I think what we want on record is a confirmation of cooperation by the department and NSF to this process. Because the historical context here is important, Chair. That NSF appeared before us on the basis of disclaimed audit outcomes, and we directed that an investigation must take place. That was not easy in itself. Right? So arriving at this point now is a major milestone. But now you've got Hawks investigations, and I'm just wondering, Advocate, if you could take us through the issue around the Fusion Center or the Anti-Corruption Task Team insofar as this investigation is concerned. But I think what we really want is that confirmation on record of cooperation, because there's been a lot of gymnastics around this particular area. My final point, Chair, is on the, I'm not going to delve much into the audit outcomes. I still think we're going to come back to those. But I wanted to zoom into slide number 9, the one of the appointments. I would really want to know specifically that those positions, before they were filled, how long they had been vacant. Because it becomes material to the turnaround outlook that the NSF and the department employs to issues that the AG raises, and why they were vacant. So the acting CEO says the chief financial officer position had been vacant for quite some time. What is that quite some time, and why did the incumbent leave, and who acted and for how long? Because this helps us piece the puzzle of what has gone wrong at the NSF. And then when the balance of those positions, those posts, will be filled, the balance of the 69, so the 34 posts that have not, the timeline towards that, and when that process will be completed. Because the issue is that NSF really wants to be kept on a short leash, because we've not received joy for the longest of time from it. So it's in that context that this, turnaround strategy and the work streams and so on and so forth, it all boils down to implementation and efficiency in that implementation. It's just those two areas, Chair. But and then, Advocate, when do you anticipate this proclamation to be signed? Because the nub of why we're here is that investigation, and that the Nexus report sampled 10 projects. That scope is, as far as we are concerned, very limited, but we'll leave it to your investigative capabilities. But to register Oguti, even the Nexus report pointed to things which needed attention. Thanks, Chair.
Those are the questions from the man who was supposed to be sitting here. Now he's taking my role. You see, I've been listening, I've been looking at him. But the fortunes of his question is that the pipes were smoking here, and you couldn't feel the smoke from those pipes. Maybe you could probably tell him how those pipes were filled between yourselves and the SIU in the previous presentation leading to this. The DG?
I thought the chair was quite deep. in his analysis of the journey traveled thus far. I think for me, what we are presenting here is an indication of the success of the collaboration between us and SCOPA as a committee. It shows that where we come from and where we are, we've gradually chunked 51% of posts that we reported to be vacant has been filled. And we are specific about the rest of others that have not been filled, at which stages they are. And I think we can provide details as well in terms of this. I think the most efficient way, Chair, is to make a submission, a written submission that breaks it down in detail, including the program by when all of these, what is the action plan for the filling of these. We can actually make that available, Chair. But I think it is very clear that we did not sit with you over the years, and we were people who are not committed. We had one aim, and it was to improve governance of NSF, and we can actually see the results right now. It's not what we want to see. Much more work needs to be done. That's why we started with the MTT report to show that internally we have a plan. We are working according to that plan. It's not the key subject of our conversation today, but it is important. Chair, I think it's fair as well, and to indicate that where we come from as a department, as you know, Chair, when the NSFAS investigation had started, the preference of SCOPA had always been that SIU conduct the investigation. And I think since then up to now, we've sat together and we've discussed this matter to a point where we have said, we work together in this regard. I'm very happy to leave the rest of my response to Advocate Mtibi, because he will answer the question about cooperation. I trust that when he does respond, he will pull together other members of the committee that might believe that there are problems to conclude that actually we have no problems. But we've expressed our views all the time. You will recall, Chair, that at the presentation of the NSFAS report, we said, because we had read the report first, the NSFAS report, we said we are worried about the implications of the non-declaration of the status of this report, whether it's secret or not. And we think that the committee can actually utilize its own prerogative to make declaration of whether the report is released or not. The committee did apply its mind, took a decision. Immediately we supported the decision. We never questioned the decision, and we accepted. And we're not going back there anymore. We are moving forward. The report was declared, and we worked within the decisions that are there. But we did advise, in the best of our opinion, without fear of favor, we advised what and we accepted. So, in our opinion, I don't believe that we have different views, but I trust that what SIU will say, all of us will embrace as an indication of the progress that is there in the system. Earlier on, I did make a comment about financial issues, the costs, and I think it was clear today that it's not only us who are concerned about costs. Even honorable members here have raised questions about the cost implications of this. And I also made a comment, Chair, in your absence, that we are happy now that this detail is being provided in a transparent kind of way. And we are prepared to work with the SIU in terms of ensuring that this is a fair dispensation. Remember, we not only are talking about NSFAS and the NSF investigation. We are busy with Fort Hare University as it is right now. People are going to court right now. We are arresting criminals that seeks to undermine governance of our institutions. Others that are still thinking about doing so, we'll soon discover our determination to making sure that they are held to account, not only them, but also internally our own. Half of those that are going to court right now are our own officials. You know, in the college system, NSF, the DHET working with SIU again, 8 officials are going to, from TVET colleges, all departmental officials are in court as we speak to you. So really the issue of our relationship in working on this issue is not characterized by us doubting the capacity of a state entity to do the work. It is much more about history, where we come from, and the context at which we are, where you want to be sure that we are together. And I can assure you, as the DG of the department, that we are working well with the Hawks. We are working well with the SIU. We are working well with the police. In the words of General Libya, who was here in the first presentation, he said we are cooperating. And this question about cooperation has emerged again today, and we await the verdict of our colleagues. And if there are still issues, I wish to indicate that I will be ready to address them and make sure that if there is inadequacies in the cooperation, this is addressed as well. That is the commitment, firm commitment, and I believe is a commitment by our minister, our deputy minister, and the DG of the department.
Thanks, DG. Head of unit.
No, thank you, Honorable Chair. Let me also take the opportunity to acknowledge and greet the Honorable Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just need to reiterate what my colleague, the DG, has said. We've had several interactions. We've appeared together at SCOPA when the process started. As he correctly said, we are here today, where I think there's a convergence of thoughts in terms of the proclamation that needed to be put through. And why I say there's a convergence of thoughts, and that happened after various meetings we've had with the DG and his team. We've also had an engagement with the minister. In fact, I think we also did have an engagement with the deputy minister. Not so long after we appeared, I think at one SCOPA meeting where the deputy minister was there, there was a need recorded at the committee that we need to meet with the department, and we did so. At that time, when we met with the deputy minister, we also indicated to him, by that time we had not as yet processed the proclamation, but we had a draft. We took him through the draft, and of course, he did not indicate anything contrary. So then we met the DG. When we met the DG and we met the minister, a week or two ago, we then indicated that the proclamation is processed. The critical part, which we really had to demonstrate and satisfy the department, was that we will at all costs not duplicate the resources of government. So what we mean by that is that where Hawks has investigated, we will ordinarily not repeat the investigation that Hawks has done. The investigation by our colleagues at the Hawks, it's a criminal investigation. Now, how would we avoid duplication? As follows. The proclamation, once it's signed, and we kick off the investigation, in terms of our law, if we identify areas that there might be criminal acts being committed here, because the Hawks is already on the scene, so to speak, the team will have to engage with the Hawks. So this is where interaction would be very key, where we interact and collaborate with the Hawks, so that if there's any documentation that we find that would indicate to any criminal action, we would then have to interact with the Hawks, either hand over that information to them, then they can proceed with the criminal investigation, and we don't repeat that investigation. So we'll have to ensure that really we are on top of what needs to be done, focus areas, interact with the Hawks, because they are there already. So we've done that before. It's not unusual, where we found that other investigating agencies, particularly the Hawks, are already at the state institution investigating. So, as I said, their focus is criminal investigation. So, our investigation, and as the proclamation would indicate, that we will be focusing on malpractice, and malpractice, it's really, if we really unpack it, is processes, policies, and all of the others. We'll also be focusing on maladministration, as expected by the law. And under maladministration, there's also a whole range of other subcategories we look at. We look at the governance of the entity. But also the law says it in so many ways. In the provisions, the law that regulates the work of SIU is that SIU would also investigate with the intent of ensuring that any other initiative that prejudices public interest has to be pointed out. So over and above the mandate to investigate corruption, which is a criminal offense, there's a whole lot of other categories that we will look at in terms of the SIU mandate. Now, the role of the Fusion Center, Honorable Chair, Fusion Center has really proved to be a very important platform where, as law enforcement agencies, we collaborate there. It's a substructure of the anti-corruption task team. And it's used in the main to ensure that as law enforcement agencies plus Financial Intelligence Center, NPA, and the others, we sit there and ensure that all the matters that are recorded on the system at the Fusion Center are coordinated appropriately. SARS is also there, and a whole lot of other agencies. So again, this is where we will ensure that we collaborate as the investigation proceeds. So I'm informed that we'll actually be looking at all the projects, and I think this came up at one of the SCOPA meetings, and I think AG also was there. That there are other projects other than the 10. So we'll be looking at. My colleague indicates plus minus 30 under correction, but it's probably an estimate at this stage. But the fact is, it's more than 10 that was reported on by the private investigation company. So I'm really glad that the DG has indicated that paragraph has really been overtaken by events. The view is different than expressed in that paragraph. How long will the proclamation take to be signed, Honourable Chair? We will follow up. It's already at the Department of Justice. It might have been on send already. We'll check on that. But I think we have really impressed it on the Department of Justice to process it as speedily as possible. We will check and probably revert to the Secretariat in terms of where in the process it is. Yeah, I think we've dealt with the issue around the costs, because that paragraph also mentions the costs, but I think we've dealt with it elaborately earlier on. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks very much, DG Advocate. I think we are dealing with questions that have been handled by Honorable Shangwa, the chair of the committee. Honorable Swear.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one question, and I saw the chair, the correct chair. I don't know what you want to call it. I touched it a little bit. But before I ask it, and I think it's a mistake from your part, I'm speaking on this presentation because it's a formal document. There's an error there in relation to the date, which for future you need to correct it so that we report correctly. You have stated that subsequently SCOPA reviewed the raw report from the minister on the 23rd of September 2023. And categorize them in terms of this is a permanent post, this one is contractual 5 years and 8. So it's a question that I'm posing to you. Thank you.
Okay. I'll share that responsibility because of DG and the acting CEO.
Thanks, Chair. I think the Honourable Member has given direction to say this is the information that we should infuse in the initial request that was made by the Honourable Chair, and we undertake then to take those into consideration then and report back. Thanks, Chair.
So we are going to provide written report in those areas in terms of detail. Okay. Is there any other question, comment? Great. I think one comment which has been made, it relates to your responses from the AG reports. I think what the chair has indicated is that we are still going to get to that detail. We'll be happy to get into that kind of scope, and it will help us at DG. Because one other angle is that you are beginning to fill in these other posts there, but you still have the post of the CEO, which is itself an acting position. So how do you want to balance it up? You're filling all these other positions below the CEO, and you're leaving the CEO's position in the acting capacity. So your plans ought to be somewhat be known, and because the audit report and the response to it relates to totality of the functionality of the entity. So there's some form of intelligence which is needed in that angle.
Thank you, Chair. That is noted, and we shall include that information. But I can assure you that regarding the position of the Chief Executive, that has already been advertised, and we are at the final stage. I think we've got a date for interviews already lined up. So we are really at the final stages there.
That's right. And we promise that in terms of the responses on the audit, on the Auditor General's assertions, we'll get an appropriate response just on those areas which have been identified. The acting CEO is very happy that there's been movement from the disclaimer to a position
we don't think there's any progress to report about. I think we are determined for clean governance, a clean audit. That's the only standard that we have. I think it's just a technical thing to show that to receive 3 conservative, disclaimers, and then all of a sudden we are beginning to shift towards a different direction. It's an indication of some kind of work, but not satisfactory, and that does not please us at all. So but we assure you, Chair, that this is done. I'm glad that the Auditor General is represented here, Chair, because at some point there was an indication that the Auditor General was very concerned about poor cooperation received from NSF at some point. And that's where we come from, to a point where we've had joint workshops with the AG, to a point where right now the AG can speak for themselves that they have 100% cooperation from NSF officials. In this regard, Chair, we will also provide the detail that is missing in the areas that speak to the audit action plan.
Okay. Are there any other areas, colleagues, that you would want to raise before we close this area? In absence of any other comments, questions, the Chair, let me appreciate the fact that we've had this kind of robust engagement between the department, SIU, the Auditor General, and the 2 entities, NSFAS and the National Skills Fund. We are doing so basically on ensuring a standard-based operation in as far as finances are concerned. And these 2 entities are really at the key point of ensuring that our young people would receive necessary skills. And the critical angle of the youth economic ability is based on the two areas. So we are happy that at least there is some movement in critical areas, but will still remain very much concerned in as far as your adherence into management-based operational angles. And you won't be able to reach that point if your vacancies are still at the level where they stand. And therefore the concern of the committee is somewhat at the angle which is acceptable at that point. And the last thing that we think in this angle, which we very much appreciate, is the fact that there's a visible collaboration between yourselves and these other entities which relate to matters of adherence to legal prescripts, whether talking about the Hawks, talking about the SIU, NPA, and your own processes, which are very critical in terms of disciplinary and related matters. So would appreciate that we can get some of the responses that we referred here. Our normal reference to such is about 14 days, you see. And because we are meeting with you consistently on these matters, even without any call yourselves, would appreciate to receive some kind of a quarterly or bi-monthly updates on these matters. That's voluntarily provide such updates, because it assists to as well build that kind of rapport between yourselves and the committee, so that we can see that there's progress on these kinds of matters going forward, so that there is no angle of constrained level of relations between ourselves. So far, I think let's appreciate that we've reached this kind of required level of understanding. Thank you very much, Advocate, and your team, and thanks, DG, in leading your team today. And of course, we would have loved that the Minister would have been here, or the Deputy Minister. I've heard their own apology, but we emphasize that point, that we would really appreciate when we have these kinds of milestones and steps going forward. It's somewhat good to have them as part of that Duhanatan, you see, on these matters. So thanks, colleagues. The meeting would be adjourned. The AG, always, not because I'm coming from that committee, but thank you very much for your...
Before you adjourn, there's just two announcements.
I would miss those announcements if you're not there. You are welcome to make those announcements.
My co-chair. Colleagues, you do know we are scheduled to visit the Central Line with PRASA on Thursday, but in light of recent developments yesterday, we are working with SABC. It's approved, but we will communicate. So please be on standby for Thursday, because we're going to check that Central Line. But as you know, there have been fatal developments yesterday, and we convey our condolences to the bereaved family as well. So we will be in touch, colleagues, by tomorrow, so that you can finalize your travel plans. The second one, Chair, next week, you know, is a leave period because of the long weekend. However, the committee is scheduled to meet on the 26th of April at 9 o'clock to 4 to have an engagement with the former CEO of ESCOM, Mr. Derrida. You are therefore, colleagues, requested to be physical in Cape Town, and I received a request from Mr. Derrida through his legal representatives to appear virtually. I have acceded to that request. However, we will be meeting physically as a committee for the purposes of pushing back on load shedding and connectivity issues. The venue will be provided, either it's M41 or the 46 or S12A of the NCOP, which is hybrid compatible. So the meeting with Mr. Derrida, colleagues, is next week. It's from, why I'm telling you now, it's from 9 to 4, so that you can make your travel arrangements in good time, because next week is a leave period. But we have applied, and for the purposes of your long weekend. So please be advised of that. And once Mr. Derrida's statement has been received, you will receive it immediately for the purposes of interaction. Tomorrow we are 9:30 meeting with the Road Accident Fund, same venue, and we will, so that's all, 3 announcements. Tomorrow, 9:30. Thanks, Chair.
Honorable List, you're counting. Do you want to add the 4th one? Thank you very much, Chair, for the announcements. But let's note that the meeting next week is on Wednesday, not Tuesday, no? Yeah, Wednesday.
Yeah, that Wednesday, the
And
26th.
I'm advised that you are all invited for lunch. It's served somewhere. I've cautiously said I'm advised. So if it's not there, don't put on me. You see? Yeah. Thank you very much. The meeting adjourns. Be careful. Tell you lunch about it. My name is Sakuma, so I'm AKA.
Sorry?
I don't know why. Business card. You can write it here. Okay, you can write other things. Thanks for your support. Oh,